This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
And welcome back, everybody. ADHD, more and more cases are being diagnosed every year, not just children, but also adults. And even adults in their 30s, I'm hearing about more and more cases. But when it is your child, a lot of challenges come up, and challenges even not just with your child, but working with their school on something called the IEP and so much more. You really are the advocate, the best advocate for your child and their journey with ADHD. And so is she. And this is what she does. She is a master IEP coach. Never knew that one existed until I met her. She walks that journey with you so that you get the most from that school district in terms of resources and support for your child. Karen Lowry joins us on the program today. How are you doing?
I'm good, Steve. Nice to be on with you.
Yeah, good to have you here. Lots to learn. Now, IEP is a term that some parents are familiar with for various reasons. ADHD, other challenges, disabilities, and so much more. I'm feeling we go to basics here. IEP, what does it stand for and exactly what is it?
Well, first, if you don't mind, I'll just introduce myself.
Sure.
And maybe just give the audience a little basis for why I do what I do, because it's really an important part of me and why I feel like I am a good person to do what I do. Again, I'm Karen Lowry, and yes, I am an ADHD coach and a master IEP coach. And my journey started with the birth of my fourth son, who was diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD. And it was quite a journey because, like many of you parents out there, I had no idea what I was dealing with. And I quickly found that many schools do not either, and don't understand it to be a disability that needs to be addressed and supported. So I kind of walked this journey with my son, and became passionate about not only helping him with the school system, but to help other parents as well. And I think the very beginning, I was just a volunteer doing lots of webinars for CHAD, children and adults with ADHD. And, then down the road became my own ADHD and coach, as well as a master IEP coach, and started my own business.
Wow.
So I'm very passionate about it because I see what happens when a parent is armed with the support that they need to advocate for their child, who they know better than anybody, and how successful these kids can be with that support. And side note, my son, had his struggles, but, had me by his side and making sure the school supported him. And eventually, he became, he went to college, went to pilot school, and he's now a pilot.
Oh my gosh, congrats.
And
That's fantastic.
it's very important that I mention that because I feel like sometimes, parents feel overwhelmed and feel a lot of negativity sometimes from, and I'm not saying every school is like this, but many of them are. Sometimes teachers are as well. And you would think in this day and age they would understand this disability, but because it's really invisible, there's nothing on the outside that makes you say, "Oh, I can tell that kid has ADHD," and also because it does encompass a lot of behavioral issues many times with the combined type, particularly of ADHD. People believe that you can control your behavior. And if you don't control your behavior, then you're a bad kid. And that's a lot of times what happens.
Mm.
Yes, you can control your behavior, but in these instances with ADHD, you need support for that. And you also need to understand yourself as well. Now, you mentioned IEP. There are some support platforms the schools offer. There are a couple of them. The 504 is more of a leveling the playing field. It is general education, but in that platform, it offers the support that's just equals the struggles that child has. And what I see sometimes is they're very generic, and that's the warning that I want to place here, actually, that being generic is not necessarily going to help your child, because if it doesn't deal with the specific individual struggles that your child has, that child is not going to do any better with or without that 504. So that's an important point, I think, with any of these support systems, that there's a collection of data and there's communication with the school. And many times that does not exist. And I've seen parents who have had that in place and say, but my child is still struggling. My child is still not doing any better. And that's where I come in to make sure the parent understands the next steps to make sure that the child is supported. And the IEP is another level of support, and that's actually special education. Many times our kids can be very well supported with a 504, but sometimes they do need an IEP, special education access to services. It's much more holding feet to the fire with goals and plans in an IEP, so it's much more specific. But sometimes they are needed too.
Hmm.
Place.
I appreciate your background. I was going to get to it. That was my plan. We front loaded it here, and I want to go back to that moment when you got the diagnosis for your son, Karen, and you're thinking, all right, well, I need help from the school. What was that like in your journey?
Um, Interesting in, like, when you have a child with combined ADHD, there's no disagreement that there's issues, because there's hyperactivity, impulsivity that's outward. The inattentive type, much more quiet, sometimes not diagnosed right away. In his case, he was combined ADHD and had some behavioral struggles as well as impulsivity, which does um, damage access to education when you are not able to focus in the classroom, and it's very evident that you can't, right?
Right.
So, I was able to get the support initially, and I still remember the very day that I went to my first meeting. But see, this was a private Catholic school, and
Mm.
they don't have the support systems like public school has. And, I didn't know that at the time. And as I actually started to collect the data. And when I say that, it's not a difficult thing to do. Collecting data, meaning watching what he's doing and watching to see whether the support is in place and is helping in a positive way. I realized that he wasn't really getting the support that he needed. So ultimately, in my case, I transferred him out of there and put him in public school, and then continued that journey. He did have an IEP. And also, too, another point to remember is, sometimes our kids are frustrating to deal with and do have behaviors. But remember also that they have behaviors because they are struggling. And
Mm.
up to 50% of our kids with ADHD have some type of a learning issue. So if you have focus issues, impulsivity, behavioral issues, all sorts of those things, as well as a learning issue that is not addressed, of course you're going to have behavioral issues. It's a vicious circle. So in his case, he did have a learning issue. It was diagnosed as dyslexia, as well as the ADHD that needed to be supported as well. But at the same time, our kids with ADHD, including him, very smart, very intuitive, and very capable. And it's sad because they have low self-esteem if they're not given the ability
Mm.
to have that support and be successful. And that's where my passion comes from.
Love it. I'm not being negative here, but I'm just repeating what I've heard from other parents, that when you deal, a lot of times when you deal with a school district advocating for your child, even if it's an IEP, that they've got two things that they're watching out for: covering their butts and saving money. And a lot of times when it comes to maybe an additional evaluation, or we need to go a little bit deeper, they'll put up all these hurdles and blocks that you have to jump over, and now to the next one, and then the next one, because they don't want to pay for another evaluation or whatever it might be. Do you hear that? Have you heard that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, some schools are great. It's kind of funny. Some schools are great and they are, willing to work with you.
Sure.
Legally, if, for instance, if your child has an IEP, they must have an evaluation every 3 years. Um, I think sometimes where there's issues, your child might have a 504 and you believe that he needs an IEP. And sometimes pushback would be there because that would be another, a lot more work with an actual specific case manager. There's a lot more to it for a child to have an IEP. But I think that in that case, it's always important, again, to collect data. It's really important to be able to make statements that, this is not helping and I can show you why.
Hmm.
And so many times my recommendation has been if you have a situation where your 504 doesn't seem to be working and you're getting pushback, I think changing the 504 to being more specific to the struggles that you see can be very helpful to monitor that before the next step. And so it's a matter of collecting data and proving along the way that, yes, we're going to understand that you feel like he doesn't need it, but we're going to make changes here and then just go from there. Rather
Hmm.
than have a big battle and fight with the school, it's really important to work with the school for sure. And in that case, that may be the case that it just wasn't done specific enough for your child, right? So I think that it just kind of depends on the situation. But sometimes, yes, you can get pushback.
Hmm. I've, being a parent, three kids, all different ages, I'm just going to say that it almost feels like you're going to court sometimes when you're dealing with a school district because you need to advocate carefully, tactfully. And you're right. Some schools are fantastic. Some are, a little careful in terms of what they do. Others, and I hear it from all different parents too. It's a challenge and an ongoing challenge when you feel like your child is not getting enough support and that they're not being aware of what the situation is. In your journey with your son, did things change along the way? Different diagnosis or things, maybe more was uncovered, and then you had to go back and change things up in terms of the support that the school was providing.
Yeah, there were a lot of changes, and you as a parent can, and for in this case, if your child has an IEP, um, and you as a parent can always call for an IEP meeting. I feel like sometimes I've had clients where they didn't have an IEP meeting until the following year, so it was a whole entire year of that IEP in place, not particularly being addressed, maybe data not being collected, maybe things falling through the cracks. And that's where I think you have problems. You can always call an IEP if you have concerns, if you have questions. Sometimes, depending on what it is, you can have a conversation with a case manager and not have to have an IEP meeting. But I mean, I think, in my personal case, that's what I did. I would call meetings when I had concerns. And I don't think that it was looked upon as very favorable at times. Um, but I do remember one thing, which I think everyone should keep this in mind and never let anyone intimidate you when you're trying to support your child. I still remember, and I don't remember the exact support that I wanted, but I remember the director of special ed, who was not my best friend, who said to me, "I don't know why you think he can do that." That was a statement. So in this journey, remember that this is not about your emotion. This is not about what you think should be done or what you think might be better or what you think your child that child can do coming from the special ed director's point of view, because that's not what this is. This is about data, and it's a black and white fact situation. So
Hmm.
for him to say that to me, my question back was, and how do you know that he can't? Same thing, right?
Hmm.
So if you don't have the support in place for something that you think he needs, why wouldn't you put that support in place to make sure that he has the right to make those forward moves in his education? So those are the type of things that happened, and I, certainly did make changes to his program, but it was just something that Again, I would like to think that every school and every teacher, every administrator has come far in the area of ADHD, but unfortunately, that's not the case in every school or every district. Some are very good, and some you just have to be there and you have to monitor. And again, I think parents become, and I do remember this in my first IEP meeting, you become intimidated, like you said, like this is like
Yes.
a legal system here, and everyone, there's like 14 people at the desk, and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, and they supposedly do, and you want that. Obviously, that's what they do for a living, so you hope that they know what they're doing. But you are also the parent, and you know your child better than anyone. You may not know all of those details, but you know your child better than anyone, and you can collect data to reflect the success of the supports that are in place.
You're reading my mind. Intimidated. That was my next question. I was just going to say, did it feel in the beginning? Did it feel intimidating? And apparently,
Oh, I just remember like yesterday, and we're talking a long time ago,
mm,
how intimidating it really was. And it was just the very beginning of this journey and understanding what I could do for a kid with a disability that I really didn't know anything about. But actually, I made sure that I did find out about it, and I actually ended up knowing more about it than all of them knew about it.
mm.
So, I think my journey has really opened my eyes to what I know is very important for these kids with ADHD and what they need. And also that people need to realize that when you hear that word ADHD, I think a lot of people consider that to be, oh, there's this kid kind of like bounces around, doesn't listen, doesn't sit in his chair. And that's not what it is. I mean, that behavioral issue can be a part of it, but there's so much more to it that's so um, underwater that you can't see that impacts them. It's all of, I don't know, some of the people listening probably have heard this terminology, executive functioning, but all of that is impacted as far as processing language and organizing and time management, all of that. And if you can't get the support to do that, if you're struggling in one of those areas, then that's going to impact your education, impact your self-esteem, and you won't be successful. And I guess my point is every child with ADHD is very individual. So it's not a child with ADHD means this is what that kid is. It's only one or two things out of a list of things could be the impacting issues. You just don't know until you evaluate what is impacting that particular child.
And I'm going to say this, and I'm not being negative here, but it is, let's be real. School district has hundreds, if not 1,000 kids, depending on the
Mhm.
district. And in the state I live in, my kids went to or do go to the largest district in the state of New York. Um, that being said, how do you get that truly individualized approach? They're only doing the best that they can. They only have certain number of staff, even at the administrative level in that one school. And there's multiple schools in a district. How are they able to really focus on your child? I have to say they can't 100%. They really can. But you can as an adult, or you can with help from you, because this is not cookie cutter. It's very individualized coaching and support, right?
Yeah, you're right. It's very individual. And yes, everyone is busy. But, and not to be negative, but it doesn't really matter. You have to make the time. If this kid needs support, then he needs support. And I think that is why things can slip through the cracks legitimately because of busy, obviously. But that's why it's so important for the parents to be on board. Parents cannot, and I've had clients like that just didn't know. Parents just assume that this is all being taken care of in the school. This 504 is in place. I'll talk to the guidance counselor next year, and then we'll talk again to see if how everything is. And that makes sense. Like, why wouldn't you as a parent think that? But if you are armed with knowledge um, that you need to follow up on things and make sure things are in place for your child, and For instance, I think a big thing, I think that like I've mentioned clients before, I think the big thing lacking is the communication piece with you and the school. Um, Without that, you don't really know how your child is doing until maybe second quarter and you see like 3Ds. Not that grades dictate everything, but certainly it is a reflection of the struggles that that kid is having. And that has happened so many times. There's no heads up at all, and all of a sudden you find out after 4 weeks that your child's underwater. So again,
Mm,
it is an agreement of communication with the school, like when we're going to communicate. Maybe in the beginning it's weekly, just to tweak whatever support system is in place for that child. And I think that's the big thing. I think it's just parents being knowledgeable about what they need to do to make sure that things are in place, because you can't really depend on your child to come home and say, these are the things that happened to me in school today. They're just they're just not going to remember, or they're going to also push it aside because it was negative. And they receive a lot of negative communication sometimes if they are not doing well and if the behavior is not that well, and they're going to just leave it there. I want to leave all that there and I'm going to go home. So you're not going to always know what's going on in the school unless you communicate with them.
mm.
But it's
It's
not
so
easy, definitely. It's not easy.
no, and there's so many different levels. Now look at your child as they get a little bit older. Maybe it's not diagnosed immediately, but what are they dealing with? Bullying, lack of self-confidence because they're not keeping up with the class. They can't control behavior, outbursts, or whatever it may be. So there's that. So much going on here.
It's very complicated. I think
Yeah.
ADHD, the more I've learned about it is, and the more the different people that I see how are impacted in very different ways. It's very complicated in how it impacts that kid, and also important that the kid learns to know about himself
Mm.
to be able to be successful.
You know what I view this as, Karen? It's as if you know somebody that has a child or went through struggles and a friend. You are a parent's friend. It's kind of what it feels like, in terms of what you're describing and your process and all of it. What's the starting point? Somebody has a question, they want to connect with you. How do they find you?
Uh, Probably two different ways. I mean, I have a website, KarenKLowry.com, where you can sign up. I do a 20-minute free consult to see if, we can work together on whatever the issues are.
Sure.
Or you can send me an email, Karen@KarenKLowry.com, and just suggest a couple of days and times that are available to you, Eastern Standard Time, and then I can work with those times and days too.
Gotcha. Lowry spelled Lowry.
That's right.
You may be a parent up against the wall and you don't know what to do. Maybe you're not getting the response from the school. And I always ride on my intuition. If you feel that something's not right or something more should be done, start the conversation with Karen. I don't know anybody on this planet that does what you do for IEPs and so much more. So for that, I thank you. And thank you for being here today. Lots more to dig into next time we get together. Looking forward.
My pleasure, Steve. Thank you.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.